So the first principle I really believe in, and I think we're misleading our young people when we tell them that they work less and less and make more and more. That's a falsehood. There's nobody and no place in which that works.
CTA with Dr. Laila did video 6.
We've been speaking since, I'd say, about 9 a.m. Time right now is 12:40. And this is the beginning of the story. Man, you truly never know people until you take the time to know people. But I keep saying, what is people's norm is still so much value. If given the opportunity, you'd have just skipped all of this other stuff and started here. But all of this other stuff has come with so much value in from different aspects of your life. So thank you for enduring with me. But let's get into the second half of your life. And I don't mean from an age perspective. I'm just talking about from a awakening perspective. Business, commerce, private sector, the solution to a country. Let's continue. And give us the context of the year as well.
Yes. So in about 2001, 2001, I had now graduated from Stanford. At this time, I have the coursework done for my doctorate in law. And my dissertation had focused on a deep dive into how KPTC, the Kenya Post and Telecommunications Corporation, went through a process of privatization to get us to the vibrant telecom sector that we have today.
AKA Posta.
Yeah, exactly, from Posta to today. And especially, what role did law have in that? And where did law have an impact, and where did law find itself unimpactful? Because that gap between law on the books and law in real life is a very big fascination for me. Okay. Because that's where the people come in, right?
I love that you and people. People, profit, passion. Anyway, but there's something I want you to do here. You've got your footing in two places. You've got your footing, as I said, you're the digital transition generation. You've got one foot, you understand pre-digital, BC, before computers. You understand AD, after digital. So there are a lot of people who are watching this who are born post-1995. The reason I say 1995, I always like using Windows 95 and Windows Explorer. That small icon changed the whole world through accessibility to the internet. So when you're talking about Posta, I already understand what it is that you're saying, because I also was born pre-95. But just quickly give context on your dissertation, just so that somebody can understand, whoa, this Safaricom mobile phone, or this mobile phone that we're having and going on data, this is the journey.
You know, for somebody who hasn't experienced it, it is so difficult to explain to people. I already said that when I left home, the next time my parents talked to me was, or the way the letters used to come. They used
to take letters.
Yes.
That alone is.
Yes, exactly. It used to take 2 weeks to get to you. Then you write, then it takes 2 weeks to get home. And you could call, but it was very expensive. In the earlier time, even before that, to take an international call, you kind of had to go downtown, and go to Extelcom and place your calls. I mean, it was, really a different thing. But coming from that time, the Kenya Post and Telecommunications Corporation was the way old parastatals used to be, where the policy was done in that same organization. The execution and the delivery of the phone was also done through the same organization. What happened is that as deregulation started happening, and this happened in utilities, including power, including telecommunications. They did something called unbundling, which meant that the people who are delivering the services to you, like the telecom company, doesn't have to be. So the way to think about KPTZ, it was almost the ministry itself, the person providing the service. Yes. All of that was in one place, and the regulation all in one place. So now unbundling means you make those separate people, so that the person who's doing the service delivery is not the same person doing the policy, and all these different parties can hold each other to account. That's the general, very simplified view of what unbundling was about. Okay. So we looked at how did KPTC then privatize? Because the notion is that a government agency isn't always best placed to provide a very market relevant and market serving service, right? So we say that let the private sector do some of these things and then let the government be more of a regulatory party. Yeah. So we just make sure that the private sector is providing services at a good standard, and that the competition in the market is vibrant, because you also don't want to create monopoly situations. That's the role of government. It's to facilitate.
Not to do business.
Not to do business, and also not to get in the way of business, right? So this whole story was about how do we understand what happened in Kenya? How do we compare that with other countries? How does regulation and market reform play out in different African and other countries, so that it can inform the way we do it better here? Of course, now a lot of water has passed under the bridge. We have MPESA. I mean, now it's very vibrant.
But in context, that is the birth of Safaricom, is it? Or no, it's not?
Yes, it is. It is. That was yes, all of this, I guess you would say, because it was all what we have as Telkom and Safaricom, all of these things came out of that system. Yes,
okay, right? I get it.
Yeah, so that's what the idea was. But then at the heart of it was this idea of market reform. How do you move a market from a very heavily regulated, bundled system into one which is vibrant and where the services are being delivered to the people at the right price, but it's still regulated. I always say that there should never be a totally free market, right? Because
the private sector,
the private sector can also go off the rails.
For profits, the private sector can do some.
Yeah. So you really want to make sure that there are rules of the game, and also that they're taking care of consumers. So, for example, if you don't regulate the people who make meat, you could find donkey meat when it should be, things like that. How is it refrigerated? How does it get to market? All of those regulations are very important for health and safety. So we want to make sure, KEBS, exactly. Yes. All of those, so government and private sector work hand in hand for the benefit of the people. That's the concept.
Okay.
So after that, having done all of that and understood the role of the private sector, I then moved to New York and joined a very large law firm. It's called the Clifford Chance. Clifford Chance is one of what they call the magic circle of law firms in England. And Clifford Chance had just bought a law firm in New York to move into the American market.
Wow.
So at that time, the company was called Clifford Chance, Rogers and Wells. And I came in as an associate. So an associate is also the most basic level. You come at the beginning and you're basically supporting senior associates who in turn are supporting partners.
Okay.
And all of this is just doing legal work, and it's corporate law. So this was all deals and finance. The particular work I was doing, and to give you an idea of their law firms, there were 460 lawyers in this law firm.
What?
Not counting support staff. So a huge firm. And so I was in a position that was working on these securities, and I had only two clients. I had Salmon Brothers and JP Morgan. And that's an entire team is just working on those two banks. So the scale in the US economy is much bigger. And when you come home to an economy like this, it's actually a very different scale.
Yeah.
But so that's the kind of...
How do you get that job? I don't just want to be like you blinked and the job was there.
No. But when you go to a school like Stanford, they really do have a placement office that tries to work with you to get you placed.
Okay.
So that's how I was able to get into it. It wasn't easy. You still have to interview several interviews, and they still have to select you. But at least there's a career office that has its whole purpose as to get every student placed.
And hence the cost of the university, and hence it being an Ivy League.
Exactly. Being an Ivy League. And that name actually speaks to employers. It kind of gives them an idea of what it is they're getting from the point of view of the training.
Yep.
We can have a debate about whether that's always accurate, but it's certainly the perception, and it helps when you're looking for work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So you get this placement in New York, back again, but not upper state, so it's not as cold.
No, now I'm in Manhattan, in the city of New York.
Wow. I'm
working in the MetLife building on the 22nd floor.
Living
in also Manhattan.
Isn't that like
upstate?
The one of the highest in terms of cost of real estate?
No, it certainly is. It certainly is. So I was in in an apartment with a roommate, but I was being paid enough to live in Manhattan. So they take that into account.
Okay.
So I was making more money than I had made in a long period of time, but or let's just say ever. But they also make sure you work for it. So, they would, sometimes I'd leave at 3 a.m. If you leave after 8 p.m., they order food to your desk. They send a cab to take you home.
Wow.
Yeah, so you really do work. And then
you're in by what time?
Then you're back the next morning at 8 or whatever time it is. So the way to think about it is that there's work and the client comes first. And then there was a culture of work where you have to be very responsive to clients. So sometimes you answer just to show the client you're on top of it.
Yes.
Like before you go home, you make sure they've gotten a response. So the work culture is very productive for sure, and definitely one that is service oriented.
Okay.
So the important thing is that the clients really understand you've got their back, because as a lawyer, when you have millions or hundreds of millions or billions on the line, you really want your lawyer to have your back, or your team of lawyers. It's not necessarily about one particular person, but knowing that these guys are thinking about you and that they're on top of your work.
We can have a full conversation about this because to a generation, that's what they call now a toxic work culture. But what's the balance between understanding that this is the environment that you've entered and this is the expectations here, with also at this stage of life it's important to do this to get a stepping stone, or mental health? Where do all these things play in as times changed? Because this Manhattan situation that you are in still exists today in the context of Kenya and Africa, and in the terms of why there's people saying there's unemployment, but at the same time, employers saying we don't have the right skill set. Are you seeing the rabbit hole that I've got? It's balancing so many worlds, but...
Why it's a rabbit hole is because it's a big topic. I think the way I approach this is with a number of principles. So the first principle I really believe in, and I think we're misleading our young people when we tell them that they work less and less and make more and more. That's a falsehood. There's nobody and no place in which that works. And people are really messing with the expectations of workers and people when you tell them that. So that's the first thing. So I think, as we were talking before about cultivating grit, resilience, the ability to bounce back, anti-fragility, all of these concepts, that's a very big part of what we need to do for our kids, so that they know people give you value for value. So if you give less value, expect to get less. Now, it doesn't mean it comes like this, which is another conversation about how do you know when to give up and to stop pushing. But as a principle in general, people, if you're giving them value, they will not let you go. So if you notice, like the example I gave, where you tell your boss, I'm quitting, and they say, wow, that sounds like a wonderful we're right behind you. It's not necessarily saying that you didn't do anything, but usually if you're really moving the needle for them, it's very difficult for them to let you go, and it speaks for itself.
Yes.
And what I mean by it speaks for itself, it means that you as a worker, a good, or not even a worker, a service provider, let's put it that way. So it could be somebody who's a freelancer who gives services and the like. You could be a politician who's trying to get voters to vote for you, whatever it is. I think the biggest thing to think about is, what can I do to understand my customer or my client so well that they get addicted to me? Like they literally cannot imagine a universe in which I am not there, and then cultivate that in yourself. And that's what I call job security. So this idea that there's any other way to be secure by forcing somebody to keep you, as opposed to serving them and keeping them happy, I think is the distinction. Once you now focus on that, then you'll find that you are much more secure, because even if you lose one, you'll get another, and you'll be able to always roll with the punches. The second thing I would say about that is really about making sure you keep your skills current, because if you're going to be somebody who's serving a client in a responsive way, then it needs to be that, like now AI is everything. And if you use AI, it can really help you with marketing and other things. So keep learning about what is latest, and don't resist, because many times when the market changes, you find people really resisting. And then now they're trying to force you as an employer to take what they want to give you, not what you really need, right? And so now it ends up being, now that's a toxic dynamic, right? Instead, I would say that the first question is it really toxic? And by toxic, are you really interpreting the situation correctly? Because if indeed you believe that you should be paid without working, or that the amount of work, things like that, then that can lead somebody asking you to deliver on the promise you made as toxic, when really you signed a contract, you said you were going to deliver this. In exchange, I was going to pay you this fee. As long as you're doing that, then we're okay. If it doesn't, and I say, now I'm complaining because what I had paid for, I'm not getting, that's not toxic, right? So that's one dynamic. So first check, is it really a toxic environment? Or are your expectations unrealistic about what exactly is possible in an exchange, right? Because that person probably has had to raise money that they are now bringing to the table to pay you, right? So what are their economics, as we talked about before? Where do you think they're getting money for this? And what is that maths like? Yeah, it might help you be more compassionate and a bit more wise in the way even you negotiate. So that's one. I think the other one, we talked about excellence and integrity, so doing a really good job at making sure that that happens all the time. The third one is really about the agreements you get into. So as you mentioned, if you're working for Clifford Chance, you're an associate, they're going to pay you a lot of money every year and you're straight out of school. But the exchange for that is that you are going to work like crazy, and you're going to work long hours, and you're going to work for clients who expect you to drop everything at the drop of a hat and come and serve them, right? That's the deal you've got into. So when you sign the contract, in those cases, there were hours that we had to commit to, that these are the billable hours that will be put into an invoice for the client. That's the deal. If you go into Clifford Chance as a law associate, that's what you're signing up for. If you don't want to do that, don't go there. But once you've committed, now, of course, it could be that you thought you were going for something, then you're surprised, in which case you can always quit and say, this is not what I had signed up for. If I had understood, I would not have signed. However, if you signed onto the line and this is the deal, then you should always follow through. That's my belief about keeping your word and a commitment and following the terms of the contract if you choose to exit. So that's the way I would think about it. There's other places where you could choose to live a certain lifestyle. And we talk about blended talent in this day and age. So there's some people who want to work part-time, long-term. There's some people who want to work part-time, short-term. There's some people who want to do long-term, full-time. And the important thing is to find a place that fits you. And then when you find that place, make sure that your contract, you're signing onto something that you really are committed to do. Like, keep your word. But try and make it something that fits with what you are committed to doing. That's what I would say. Yeah, that's where you become somebody who's known as a person of excellence and a person who keeps their word. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how I would look at that particular.
Like, you just brought that out of your head. Like, that's so brilliant. The one thing that I'd add is sometimes allow the environment to mold you and grow you. It's stretching you. You didn't sign up for this. You didn't. It is outside what you thought you knew.
Could do.
You get the pizza slice of what you know and what you know you don't know. But there's what you don't know you don't know.
No.
So sometimes the environment, it's taxing, it's hard, it's long hours, but it's stretching you, and you don't know that it's stretching you to make that the minimum norm in your next season. It's growing your muscles. You're going to the gym for the first few days. Yeah.
No, that's an important point. Actually, I didn't mean to say, if you don't like it, quit either.
Yeah,
because this could be what you really learn from and what stretches you and what shows you what you're capable of. And don't fear hard work. Don't fear going home tired. Don't fear also having to work with crusty people, because that's the other thing. All of us, we said we're learning. None of us is particularly perfect yet, neither are you. So when you come into a workplace, don't expect everybody to have prepared everything for you, to be, kind of tiptoeing around your feelings and all of that. Come with a sense that I'm coming here to learn, but also I'm coming here to solve a problem. Because that way you're not asking, why hasn't everything been put in place for me? Instead, you're asking, wow, this place is broken. They look like they really need me. If I can find a way to fill this gap, now we're getting to that job security idea, right? Because they need you. Yeah, so that's an upside down way of thinking about it. I have seen people who appear and immediately they get to the role, they start saying, this doesn't work, this place is so disorganized. Why is this place? And you're like, but that's why we hired you, to come and organize us, especially since your eye is so tight on what's good and not good. Show us your talent and help us get to the vision that you think we should have attained. Yeah, it's a very different way of looking at things.
I don't think I've ever met an employer who doesn't want a solution-based person. As a problem solver.
Yeah.
Like, I love what you've talked about job security. Make yourself so valuable that losing you is
intolerable.
It hurts. It hurts. Yeah. Okay, so now you're doing this crazy work. I was making some great money, but let's be honest, it's but also you're in a very high energy, I don't know what the word is, but
bar.
High bar. That's preparing you for anywhere globally. Let's be honest.
That's true. It was really good training and a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Because
fun is not the word that's making
No. Because remember, I love intellectual challenge, and basically every day you're learning more about contracts, about the way the stock markets work. So we were listing bonds, which we'll talk about in a minute, on the New York Stock Exchange, on Nikkei in Japan, and on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. So our work was these big banks we were working for would float bonds, which is requests for people to lend them money. And we would prepare the documentation for that and then make sure it's listed so that money is, and these are billions and billions of dollars.
Wait, how do you see, in nowhere in this story have you talked about being a professional in finance. So now you're getting to learn those world of finance.
Yes.
Or this maybe you had studied this in.
The way to think about it is when you're given a foundation in law, remember I had talked about the contracts and the torts and the different legal principles. Once you understand those legal principles, you then translate. Of course, they become more sophisticated as you become more specialized. Let's put it that way. But at the bottom line of, let's say, project finance, or purchasing a building, if you come to the real estate finance thing, or whether you're doing a merger and acquisition, it's still about equity, which is stocks and owning, and debt, which is borrowing. Those are two ways you finance a transaction. So whether or not they call them fancy things, medium-term notes, it's just somebody borrowing or somebody investing. That's what it is. And then after that, there's different ways that you manage risk. So every time you and I get into an agreement, especially if we don't know each other or we don't know the future, we'll spend a lot of time in the contract trying to switch risk to each other. This is called risk allocation. So for example, if you're a freelancer, I want you to do a graphic design job for me, but I don't know you. I'll try and say, let me pay you after you've done the work. But you don't know if I'm the kind of person who, even if I have the work, I'm not going to pay you. So you try to get paid up front. That's risk allocation. We don't think of it as that way. But basically, we're trying to switch. Exactly. So we're all trying to manage our risk.
So it's all back and forth.
It's a negotiation.
A negotiation to figure out, and can we get at least a 50 line? But you're trying to get it to 100%.
Yes, exactly, to cover myself, and you're trying to cover yourself. But the fact is, I might pay you and you haven't done the work, right? Or I don't like the work you've done. Now we're in a dispute, right? So how do we try and balance it? And then that thing of risk allocation is just enough for me to feel I'm covered enough to start. Because that's the other thing that happens in employment. I tell people that, many people try to say negotiate before you've gotten the job, because after that you won't be able to reopen. So try and get your salary now. But I say no. Really, if you're a good worker, you actually want to wait until they've seen you before now you start negotiating. Because what the person is trying to do by offering the low salary is that they're trying to manage like, what if we offer this huge amount?
And then this person that good jack.
Can't do anything, and now I'm stuck, right? So it's just understanding that that's what's happening, and that's the dynamic. It's not always somebody trying to be unfair to you. It's just everybody's money hurts them to pay, right? There's some
and they
of that.
expect value back for it.
Everybody wants value.
They want more value than they're giving you.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to make a bit of a margin, right?
They're paying you for you, but then they need you also to bring enough money to also pay the fixed costs like rent and things like that, and also profit.
Yeah, it has to add up. Yeah.
Oh, this is amazing. Okay, so this is what you're doing. You're structuring these bonds with JP Morgan.
Yes, for the two clients, JP Morgan and Salmon Brothers, two big banks.
Wow.
And so every time they're borrowing money, they come through this law firm that floats these agreements. Because when somebody lends money to JP Morgan, they have to sign a lot of agreements. So we do all of that.
Wow.
And these people, half of the people you're working with are in London, Nikkei, they're in Japan, which is why I was saying that when you send an email before you leave home, it's just so the Japanese person knows I've got you, right? Even though there's a time difference. So it was a very steep learning curve, very challenging. But so just brain opening, mind blowing.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. So I learned a lot, and I fell in love with finance after that. I said, now I get it. I can do this, and I understand how moving money eventually ends up getting money into the hands of businesses and entrepreneurs, so that then they can hire more people as their companies grow.
Yeah.
And then now the whole society starts to move upwards, because these smaller firms are becoming bigger, medium firms are becoming bigger, and now we're creating growth. So it just added up for me, and I just have never looked back.
But there's something that you said, my mind is just like your jigsaw puzzle is amazing, by the way. It's so clear for me.
How everything is fitting.
Yeah, how everything is fitting, but even the context of time. And the reason why I say that is because you've said Manhattan, you've said 2001.
Very good.
So for me,
you're listening.
Yeah, I'm in the story.
Something is about to happen, right?
Exactly. I'm just like, what's about to happen? Yeah. So like, as much as you're flourishing, your world's about to change.
That's right.